Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we talk about money, we end up talking about math.
Oh, yeah. Spreadsheets, formulas, PE ratios.
All of it, spreadsheets color-coded to within an inch of their lives. But today, we are throwing the calculator out the window.
Which I gotta say, creates a bit of a mess, but I think it's necessary for where we're going.
Absolutely, because today we are diving into The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And the core idea here is something that, it kind of rattled me when I first read it.
Mm,
Housel basically argues that finance isn't a hard science like physics. You can't just plug in the numbers and get the right answer. Instead, he calls it a diagnosis.
a diagnosis. It's such a striking way to put it, isn't it?
It sounds so clinical, like, I'm sorry you have a bad case of human brain.
Well, in a way you do. I mean, that's the point he's making. You can be an absolute genius, top of your class at MIT, understand every derivative market in existence,
Right.
and still go completely broke.
Right.
And conversely, you can be a totally ordinary person with zero financial training who just, understands how to behave, and you can end up wealthy. You can't do that in medicine.
No, you don't see a janitor accidentally performing successful open heart surgery because he had patience.
Exactly. But in finance,
Yeah.
that actually happens. So our mission today isn't to find the best stock tip. It's to unpack these hidden mental traps that Housel identifies.
Yeah, we need to figure out why smart people do such stupid things with their money and how we can trick our own brains into not being one of them.
So where do we start?
Let's start with the first trap, which is this idea that no one is crazy. Now, I have a hard time with this one because I have seen people do some objectively crazy things with their 401ks.
We all have,
Yeah.
for sure. But Housel's argument is that while people do crazy things, no one is actually crazy. We are all just victims of our own context.
So you and I could look at the exact same data.
The exact same numbers on a screen, and we could come to two completely opposite conclusions.
Yeah.
And we'd both be right based on our own lived experience.
Okay, give me a concrete example. Because if the market is crashing, isn't selling at the bottom just wrong?
Mathematically, yes, but psychologically. So let's look at the generation gap. Imagine a guy who was a young stockbroker during the Great Depression.
Okay.
He saw people losing their homes, he saw soup lines, he saw the market drop 89%. To him, the stock market isn't a wealth generator.
It's a casino. It's a place where you lose everything.
It's a casino where the house always wins and you leave in a barrel. That trauma is burned in.
Deeply.
Now, compare him to a tech worker who started investing in the late 90s, or even someone who got into crypto in 2017. To them, risk isn't something to fear.
No, risk is how you get rich. They've seen stuff double overnight.
Precisely. So the depression survivor thinks the crypto kid is reckless, and the crypto kid thinks the survivor is a coward. But neither is crazy.
They're just working from different data sets.
Exactly. Housel points out, if you were born in 1970, the S&P 500 went up almost tenfold during your teens and 20s. But if you were born in 1950, the market went literally nowhere during that same, influential period of your life.
Yeah.
Those two people are going to navigate a recession very
It
differently.
makes you rethink how we judge people. Instead of thinking, my uncle is an idiot for keeping all his cash under a mattress, you have to ask.
What war did he live through that I didn't? That's the key. We're all trapped in our own history bubbles.
Okay, speaking of history.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the story that honestly, it just stopped me in my tracks. It's the comparison between Bill Gates and a guy named Kent Evans. I had never heard of Kent Evans before this.
Most people haven't. And that's the tragedy of it. This story really illustrates the trap of luck versus risk.
You're right.
We love to look at a billionaire like Bill Gates and say, he's a genius, he worked hard, he had a vision. And look, all of that is true,
But
we ignore the math of his luck. So let's go back to 1968. Bill Gates is a student at Lakeside School in Seattle. Now, this isn't just any school. This is the only high school in the world, literally the world, that had a specific type of teletype computer terminal that students could use.
wait, the only one in the world?
According to Housel's research,
Yeah.
The chances of an American high school student having access to a computer in 1968 were about 1 in a million.
So he didn't just have a brain, he had a machine. He was clocking thousands of hours of coding practice before most college professors had even seen one.
So if he goes to the high school down the street,
There's no Microsoft.
it's that simple. That is 1 in a million luck. But here is the kicker. At Lakeside, there were actually 3 computer geniuses in that group. Bill Gates, Paul Allen, and Kent Evans.
The third musketeer?
They were best friends. Gates and Evans actually shared a phone number in the school yearbook. They talked about running companies together, becoming CEOs, conquering the world.
And by all accounts, Ken Evans was just as smart, just as driven.
Just as skilled as Gates.
So what happened? Why isn't it the Gates-Evans operating system?
Because before they graduated high school, Kent Evans went mountaineering. And he died in an accident.
Man.
And the odds of a high school student dying in a mountaineering accident in the U.S. are roughly 1 in a million.
Whoa, okay. That hits hard.
The perfect mirror image. Bill Gates experienced 1 in a million luck. Kent Evans experienced 1 in a million risk.
Same potential, same drive, opposite outcomes, all from forces totally outside their control.
It's heavy. It really destroys that idea that we are the sole captains of our destiny, doesn't it?
It forces humility. It has to. You have to realize that when you succeed, it's rarely just because you're great. And when you fail, it's not always because you messed up.
We judge ourselves and others way too harshly because we just ignore the role of luck and risk.
So if we can't control luck, and our logic is flawed by our past, how do we even make a plan? Because the standard advice is always be rational.
Do a spreadsheet.
Yeah, make the decision that has the highest mathematical return.
And Housel says that is terrible advice.
Which feels wrong. Shouldn't we be rational?
Well, you're not a robot, though. You're a biological creature with cortisol and adrenaline. The goal shouldn't be to be rational. It should be to be reasonable.
Okay, break that down for me.
A rational spreadsheet says, put 100% of your money in stocks, never sell, and ignore the volatility because historically it goes up.
Right. Mathematically, that wins.
But what happens when the market drops 50% and your life savings is cut in half?
I panic. I assume the world is ending. I sell everything at the bottom just to stop the pain.
Exactly. The rational plan failed because you couldn't stick to it. A reasonable plan might be, you know what, I'm going to keep 20% in cash.
Which earns nothing. It's inefficient.
Totally inefficient. But if that little pile of cash makes you feel safe enough that you don't sell during a crash, then being irrational actually made you more money in the long run.
So the best financial plan is just the one that lets you sleep at night.
That is the literal benchmark. If you can't sleep, you're going to make a mistake. Prioritize sleep over spreadsheets.
I like that. I can get on board with that. Okay, so we've covered the internal stuff, how our brains process risk and history. But we don't live in a vacuum.
No, we live in a society.
And we have to talk about the social traps, specifically the man in the car paradox.
Oh, this is a classic. And it's so funny because once you hear it, you cannot unsee it.
It's so true. I actually caught myself doing this the other day. I was walking my dog, and this guy drives by in a vintage Porsche 911, beautiful car, silver convertible. And my immediate thought wasn't, I wonder what that guy does for a living, or he must be a fascinating person.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking, man, I would look so cool in that car. People would look at me and think I was successful.
And that is the paradox. The driver of that car thinks everyone is staring at him, admiring him. But they aren't.
No.
They're staring at the car and using it as a prop for their own daydream.
It's brutal. We buy these expensive things to gain respect and admiration, but the things we buy actually stop people from seeing us?
Housel puts it bluntly. Humility, kindness, and empathy will bring you more respect than horsepower ever will. But, you can't buy those at a dealership.
This leads right into the definition of wealth versus rich. I feel like I use those words interchangeably, but the source material draws a hard line in the sand.
A very hard line. Rich is current income. It's visible. It's the Porsche, the diamond watch, the Instagram vacation.
You know someone is rich because you see them spending money.
But wealth is hidden. Wealth is income not spent. It's the option to buy something later. It's the $100,000 you didn't spend on a car, just sitting in an investment account, compounding.
And the problem is, because wealth is invisible, we can't see it to copy it. We see the guy with the fancy car and think success. We don't see the guy in the Honda Civic who has $2 million in the bank.
And because we copy what we see, we get into this cycle of spending to look wealthy, which ironically just destroys our actual wealth.
Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money.
And when you get on that treadmill of looking rich, you run into the most dangerous trap of all. Never enough.
This is the hardest skill in finance, knowing when to stop.
The goalpost has such a nasty habit of moving. You get the raise, you buy the bigger house, you get the bonus, you buy the boat.
The source brings up Sam Bankman-Fried here. And talk about a modern example.
It's just a tragedy of psychology. Here's a guy who was worth, $20 billion at age 29. He had more money than he could ever spend. He had status. He was the next Warren Buffett.
But it wasn't enough.
It was not enough. He needed to be bigger. He needed to be the biggest. So he took these massive, fraudulent risks mixing customer funds, not because he was starving, but because he was chasing more. And now he has nothing. He risked what he had and needed for what he didn't have and didn't need.
There's that great historical comparison in the text, too. Napoleon envied Caesar.
And Caesar envied Alexander the Great.
And Alexander envied Hercules, who wasn't even real.
It's an infinite ladder of envy. Unless you can look at your bank account and just say, this is enough, you are always one step away from a disaster.
But it's not just envy, right? It's also about knowing who you're competing against. This is the point about playing the wrong game.
Oh, absolutely. This is Trap 18. It's so important. We tend to take financial advice as if it applies to everyone. But money is personal.
Right. Like, I'll turn on the TV and see some pundit screaming, sell everything, and I panic.
But who is that pundit talking to? Maybe he's talking to a day trader who needs to close his positions by 4 p.m.
Right.
If you're a retiree trying to make your money last for 20 years, copying the day trader is suicide.
Or a crypto kid versus a widow.
Exactly. A lot of financial bubbles happen because people start playing someone else's game. You see your neighbor getting rich flipping condos, so you think, I should do that.
But you don't know their situation.
Maybe he's a professional real estate developer with high-risk tolerance, and you're a dentist with 2 kids in college. You're playing different sports. You have to know your own game and just ignore the scoreboards of everyone else.
Stay in your lane has never been more expensive advice to ignore. Okay, let's shift gears to the mechanics. How wealth actually happens. Because there is one stat about Warren Buffett that I need you to explain. I think it's a typo.
I know exactly which one you mean.
Warren Buffett, worth roughly $160 billion. The source says $156 billion of that came after his 65th birthday. That can't be real.
It is 100% real. And it breaks our brains because we just don't understand exponential growth. We think Buffett is a wizard at picking stocks. And he's good. But his real secret isn't his returns.
It's his time.
It's his time. He started investing when he was 10 years old. He is 93 now.
So if he was just a normal guy who started at 30 and retired at 60...
If he had the exact same annual returns, but only invested from age 30 to 60, few people would have ever heard of him. His net worth would be roughly $11 million.
Which is nice, but not.
Not cover of Time magazine, nice. The secret is he kept the compounding machine running for 80 years.
It's like planting a tree. You don't see anything for 5 years. Then it's a sapling. Then suddenly, 50 years later, it's this giant oak.
And you can't rush the oak tree. You just have to wait. But waiting is hard because in the meantime, the market's going up and down. Which brings us to the concept of the fee versus the fine.
This was my favorite takeaway. This is the one I'm actually going to use.
It's such a simple mindset shift. When you look at your investment account and it's down 10 or 20%, what do you feel?
I feel like I'm in trouble, like I got a speeding ticket. I feel like I did something wrong.
That's the fine mentality. You think a loss is a punishment. But Housel says no. Market volatility isn't a fine, it's a fee.
It's the cost of admission.
The admission to what?
To the returns.
To the returns. Look at Netflix. Between 2002 and 2018, Netflix stock went up 35,000%. Phenomenal.
Insane.
But to get that return, you had to hold on to the stock while it traded below its all-time high 94% of the time.
94% of the time, you were staring at a loss from the peak.
Correct. That mental anguish, that constant discomfort, that's the fee. Think of it like Disneyland. You have to pay $100 to get in.
Yeah.
You don't stand at the gate and complain that the $100 is a punishment. You pay it because you want to ride Space Mountain. If you want the 35,000% returns, you have to pay the volatility fee.
So next time my account drops, instead of panicking, I should just say, bill's in the mail. I'm paying the fee to keep the lights on.
Exactly. It completely changes your relationship with the red ink.
Now, paying that fee is worth it because of something called tail events. This sort's got a little technical here with the Russell 3000, but can we break this down? What is a tail event?
In simple terms, a tail event is a 1 in 1,000 event that drives all the results. Think of it like a movie studio.
Okay, I'm a producer.
You fund 20 movies, 10 of them are total flops, you lose all your money, 9 of them basically break even, but one of them is Avatar.
And Avatar pays for the 10 flops and buys me a private island.
That is exactly how the stock market works. Since 1980, 40% of all public companies have effectively failed. Most companies are duds.
Wow.
But the 7% that were massive winners, The Apples, the Amazons, they drove all the market's returns.
So you can be wrong half the time, heck. You can be wrong most of the time and still end up rich.
Yes, if you stay in the game long enough to catch the tail event,
Yeah.
if you panic and sell during the flops, you miss the avatar moment.
So it's not about batting 1,000. It's about not getting kicked out of the stadium.
Survival's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the final theme. Freedom and defense. Because getting rich requires offense, but staying rich, that is pure defense.
Offense and defense. I like that. So offense is taking risks, being optimistic.
Right. But defense is paranoia. Housel suggests having a barbell personality. You need to be optimistic that the world will get better in the long run.
But paranoid that a recession or a job loss could wipe you out in the short run.
Exactly. And what are we defending? Is it just the number in the bank account?
No. This is the most important part of the whole book, I think.
Me too. The highest dividend money pays isn't interest. It's freedom.
The Angus Campbell study?
Yes, they studied happiness, and they found that having a huge house or a fancy job title, it didn't matter much. The single strongest predictor of well-being was having a strong sense of control over your own life.
Being able to say, I can do what I want, when I want, with who I want.
That is the ultimate wealth. Money is just a tool to buy you out of things you hate. It buys you autonomy. That's why Housel says you should save money, even if you don't have a goal.
Which goes against everything we're taught. Save for a house, save for a car.
No, just save. He defines savings as the gap between your ego and your income.
Huh. I love that.
If you can keep your ego low, you save money. And that money becomes a hedge against bad luck. It gives you the power to walk away from a toxic boss. It gives you the power to take a lower-paying job that you actually love.
It buys you options.
And options are worth more than luxury goods.
So if we zoom out, the deep dive today is basically telling us to stop trying to be a math genius and start trying to be a psychological survivor.
Absolutely. Define your own game. Understand that luck plays a huge role. Don't let the man in the car dictate your spending. And just stay in the game long enough for compounding to work its magic.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one final thought from the source. It's something Housel calls the end of history illusion. And honestly, this one is keeping me up at night.
It's a fitting place to end. The illusion is that we all realize how much we've changed in the past. If you look back at yourself 10 years ago.
Oh, God. The haircut, the music taste, the opinions. I was a completely different person.
Right? We admit that we used to be different. But we assume that the person we are today is the finished product. We think, I've evolved. This is who I am now.
And we completely underestimate how much we will change in the future.
Exactly. So we make these 30-year commitments, huge mortgages, very specific career paths based on what present me wants, totally ignoring that future me might want to live in a cabin and paint watercolors.
We lock our future selves into prisons built by our past selves.
That's a great way to put it.
So here is the challenge for you listening right now. Look at your financial life. Are you making extreme decisions today that are going to trap the person you become in 10 years?
Give yourself room to change. Avoid the extremes. A little flexibility today is the best gift you can give your future self.
A little flexibility and maybe a little forgiveness for being human. This has been a fascinating dive. I think I'm going to go look at a spreadsheet and feel nothing.
That's the spirit.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.